going to go ahead and get started, and I'm going to open up the hearing on House Bill 2659 and ask Jason to give us a brief introduction. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. House Bill 2659 would enact the Sudden Cardiac Arrest Prevention Act. This act would apply to athletic activities, including practices, intramural and interscholastic competitions, and cheerleading events. It would also apply to both public schools and accredited non-public schools. The first part of the act requires the State Department of Education to develop and publish information regarding the nature and warning signs of a sudden cardiac arrest. This information will be published on the department's website and made available to students who are participating in athletic events, their parents, and the coaches for those events. Each student who wishes to participate in an athletic activity and their parent or legal guardian would be required to sign an acknowledgement that they had received and reviewed this information in order to participate. Second, the bill would require that any student who loses consciousness or faints while participating in an athletic event or who is known to have done so be removed from full participation in that athletic event until they can be evaluated by a proper medical professional and cleared to return to full participation. If the student has exhibited symptoms of a sudden cardiac arrest but hasn't fully lost consciousness or fainted, then they may be removed from participation to undergo a medical review if the athletic trainer or the coach believes that those symptoms are related to a potential cardiac issue. Third, the bill would require each coach of an athletic event to annually complete a sudden cardiac arrest training course that's provided through Simon's Heart or another approved provider by the department. The coach would be ineligible to coach until that course had been completed. So this would be a pre-school year course completion for each coach in the school. Finally, 2659 imposes suspension penalties on any coach that fails to complete that course and then proceeds to go ahead and coach an athletic event during the school year. First offense is a suspension for the remainder of that athletic season. Second offense is a suspension for that athletic season and the next one. And the third offense would be a permanent suspension from coaching duties. The bill goes into effect on July 1st of this year if enacted, and I'd be happy to stand for any questions.
Thank you, Jason. I'm going to let Adam acknowledge hands raised for questions. Are there questions for Jason?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Sanders.
So is the definition of an athletic season the current season you're in, like, for example, the football season, but wouldn't apply to basketball or baseball, or is a season defined as the school year?
The bill specifies it as it's the season when the violation occurred. So if it is a football coach and they haven't completed the course and they've started the football season, it would be suspension for the remainder of that football season.
So if he's also a basketball coach, then he could coach basketball?
Not if he hasn't completed the course.
Well,
if he
yeah,
goes
obviously.
and tries to coach basketball and still hasn't completed the course, then that would be a second offense and would suspend him for that basketball season and the next basketball season.
But maybe he just wasn't aware of this, so he's suspended for the rest of the football season, but he could come in compliance so he could then coach basketball.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Donahue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman or Vice Chairman or whatever. So it says here, sudden cardiac arrest in school athletic activities. So what happens if a child is in gym, everything's fine, goes back to his class, and has cardiac arrest?
The bill does not appear to apply to any curricular activities such as gym. It applies to athletic events.
Okay, so an athletic event. So they have weightlifting in the morning. Go to school after that, cardiac arrest. They can't, who's going to treat that or who's responsible then?
Well, the student would be treated as any other student who suffers a sudden cardiac event during the school year and would receive immediate medical attention. In terms of the bill, they wouldn't necessarily be, removed from participation because they hadn't passed out or fainted while participating in an athletic event, but that would probably constitute a symptom, and so they may be removed from participation based on the judgment of the school officials.
So the school already has a policy then for cardiac arrest, other than non-athletic, you're saying?
Well, most school districts have policies for medical emergency response, and that's what that would fall under. They may not have policies specific to sudden cardiac events, which is what this bill would essentially require.
Why wouldn't they just upgrade their current policy to cover cardiac arrest? Why do we need a whole new bill?
Well, under current law, they wouldn't be required to update their policy to cover sudden cardiac arrest as prescribed by the bill. If the bill is passed, then it becomes a legal requirement.
I know they're not required to, but they have a policy in place currently with a student, as my example was, so he has a problem, they have a policy in place to handle that student, correct? Maybe not cardiac arrest, but just medical attention. Is that correct?
They likely have a policy that handles responses to emergency medical events. I will let the proponent speak more fully to this, but my understanding is they likely do not have a policy that requires information on sudden cardiac arrest be given to students, that students sign an acknowledgement before they participate that they've received that information, or that coaches be suspended for not taking a training course. All of those provisions would not be typical of a school medical emergency policy.
Do the students, do the students need to sign their existing policy that they have?
Not to my understanding, no.
So why would they sign this?
Well, the bill would require, the law would require it.
But why? Why would they
I'm going to
require it if
defer
they
that
don't?
to the proponents.
All right, thank you.
Representative Orr.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Long, I do not understand what a cardiac arrest training course would look like, and why does it have to be the one that's provided by Simon's Heart? I'm not familiar with that.
Again, I'll defer to the proponents on that specific language. I'm not privy to why that particular language was put into the bill.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Do the schools that employ coaches that haven't received this training bear any responsibility in this process?
Specifically under the bill, I don't see any provisions for the school districts other than they would have loss of that coach for the remainder of that season and would then bear the responsibility of finding a replacement coach.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Burtkamp.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Is coach defined anywhere in here?
No, it is not.
Okay. But and I guess I'll follow up with the proponent maybe here in a little bit. Thank you.
Representative Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Do we know what the difference is between this proposed bill law and the current Kansas State High School Activities Association policies regarding CPR training?
No, but we can certainly look into what the current state association's policies would be.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Donahue once more.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So I just want to make sure, so the coach has to complete this course, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So what if the coach says, look, I don't want to be responsible for this. I don't feel comfortable doing this. Even if I train, I don't want to do it. So what happens then?
That would be between the coach and the school district as to.
But it's not spelled out any place in the bill that they are mandated that they have to do it or lose their job or something like that.
Well, it's required that to coach the team, they have to pass the course, the training course, in order to coach the team.
Right.
But in terms of what additional responsibilities beyond coaching the team are, that would be between the school district and the coach.
Right, but I'd say there could be a conflict because the coach, I'll take the test, I passed it, but I'm not going to do it because I don't want the responsibility. And if he advises them, is he still liable, or, again, I would imagine the proponents will.
Well, I will point out the fact, on page 2 of the bill at the bottom, there is a provision that provides civil liability immunity for the coaches for any actions or inactions that they may conduct under this bill, except for gross negligence or reckless behavior. So if a coach just told up front the school district that they were not going to do certain things with respect to recognizing symptoms, and that those responsibilities were shifted to, say, an athletic trainer for the team, the coach would not arguably bear any liability for any events that happened unless the coach was acting with gross negligence or recklessness.
All right, let's move on to Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is really a difficult bill. As a former athletic trainer, still licensed, I worked at the high school, college, and professional level, and I've never seen a coach that had an interest in doing this. They want to coach, and their emphasis in training and education is in coaching. I would much rather see a bill that required athletic trainers or therapists to be in attendance at the games. Most of the hospitals in the state of Kansas now have athletic trainers on their staff that go out to the schools. And I just don't see a football coach spending a lot of time on how to save a kid's life. They'll do it, but whether or not they pay attention to the training is the question that I have, because they want to coach. You know, they'll attend it so that they can get by, but they won't really get into it. And I think that this is serious enough that it has to be somebody that has a comprehension of what the training is and involves to be able to save somebody's life. I just don't like the bill. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Schmidt? No? My fault, sir. Representative Murphy?
Thank you. My wife was involved in EMS for over 20 years, and going, as our kids are going up and all played sports and everything like that, there was generally EMS there at all the events, whether, no matter what it was. Obviously not during practice, but, when they're really seriously more likely to be injured or have an event like this, there's, people who are really trained and make their living at this. So I kind of agree with the representative about I question the need for this sort of thing.
Representative Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Does this bill or any other bill that you're aware of require defibrillators be in the schools?
This bill does not, and I'm trying to recall if there's any statute that requires a defibrillator to be on the premises of a school. I would have to look into that.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Representative Stogsdill, and then Chairman Hubert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Representative Lynn and I offered this bill just to basically to raise a lot more awareness about this. Our research showed that this is that sudden cardiac arrest is the #1 killer of high school athletes and across the country. And so what we were hoping to do was to emphasize the fact that this is a very serious event when it happens, and that we would hope that coaches, this is just a basic course in getting them to understand the seriousness, what to look for, the symptoms and so on. And we're hoping that it's, as I say, I think it's like a 2-hour course that can be taken over the internet, that sort of thing, to make them more aware of those, of the things that they need to look for. And then also to make parents aware of it. And I talked to people at the High School Athletic Association. I talked to people on the state board. They didn't seem to have a problem with it. And again, it's just, we think that this would just make it safer for our athletes. If the parents knew more about this, if they were aware of the seriousness of this event happening, if coaches were more aware of it and just had a minimal amount of training, at least knowing what to do if there wasn't medical personnel available at those events. And I don't know whether school districts can provide EMS services and so on at tennis events, at maybe track and field, sure, football, the major sports and stuff like that, but some of the minor sports, we just think it would be better if coaches were reminded of this each year, because if this happens, it can be a killer, and can be a killer in a hurry. So that was our intention of it, and the training course is offered. This was a course that was offered through most of the high school athletic associations across the country, and that's why that particular what was it, the suite? Just had it a minute ago. But anyway, that's why that was that particular course was offered in this bill. But anyway, if I would, as I say, we just thought that this was a good bipartisan effort to keep our students more safe in athletic events.
Representative Hubert.
Thank you, committee. I appreciate my ranking member's remarks, and I also spoke with Representative Lynn. I agreed to have a hearing to bring attention to this issue. It's my intention at this point in time for this to be an informational hearing, and I don't plan on working it. I haven't made a final decision, but that's where I'm at right now. I hope to now get into just having the informational hearing that it's intended to be and get into the testimony. And thank you for your questions, and we will have a chance now for our first proponent to maybe answer some of those questions in more detail. With that, I would like to welcome Brian Connell to the mic. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for inviting us in. Mr. Stogsdale, thank you for working with Megan on this. Can you all hear me just fine? So I'm a dad. My name is Brian Connell. This is my wife. My son, I'm representing for him. He is at Fort Hays State at this point in time. My son suffered a cardiac arrest. May 6, 2019, his heart stopped on the pitching mound at Blue Valley Southwest High School in front of 400 or 500 people. His cardiac arrest is partly my fault because I'm ignorant, at least I was. This bill is not about performing CPR using an AED. This bill is not about being capable of giving them life-saving skills. This bill is about alleviating the ignorance of those of us who have children participating in the activities that they're participating in. If you don't know that something's wrong, you can't get help. And almost every parent I've ever talked to has said, I would do anything for my children. So I provided a written document with a little background, but the March of Dimes was created because 1 out of every 400 children are born with heart defects in this country. And I don't know if you all walked any of those when you were kids or younger. I did. I'm about the same age as a lot of y'all, so I remember those days. But 1 out of every 400 kids, according to the American Heart Association, the American Medical Association, are walking around our campuses with a life-threatening cardiac issue right now and don't know it. All this does, along with the other 32 states that have approved this bill, says we're going to take a piece of paper or send a link to every adult whose child wants to participate and say, please be aware that this can happen. Be aware of what fainting can do. Be aware of the signs, and if you recognize that, please get somebody to check into it. The parents they're just gonna sign off just like they basically do with a physical today, right? They sign off on it, but I can't tell you how many times we filled out those same physical forms and forgotten about one of the surgeries, or my kid had pneumonia when he was 4 years old, or anything like that. They're not to save everybody. They're to save more than we're saving today. American Heart Association says the #1 killer of anybody everywhere in this country has been, for the last 20 years, sudden cardiac arrest outside of a hospital. Over 345,000 people, children and adults, die every year of sudden cardiac arrest. Cardiac arrest, so just to make everyone know, is different from a heart attack. A heart attack is plumbing. At my age, those are the issues I worry about a lot, right? And with my eating, I'm down 50 pounds, so woo. But cardiac arrest is electricity goes off. You can Google my son's name, Brennan Connell, and you can find the videos, God knows they're out there on TV and the news, that actually show when the electricity went off. And if you've actually turned off that light switch, you know, boom, everything goes down. He landed on his face. Wife was watching, I'm watching. We are only blessed that we were at the right place. Doctors, nurses, people, bystanders ran to him, cut open his shirt, cut off his clothes, and started CPR when they realized his heart was stopped. Most of you all know that you can hold your breath for about 2 minutes and you're in fine shape, but at 3 minutes and every minute after that, you lose 10% of your cognitive ability and your ability to actually survive and then thrive afterward. So it was critical. So I'm going to stop the story of actually what happened, because roll that back. I was never even afforded or paid really good attention to that. That was even a risk. Olathe Schools, where we are partners with Blue Valley and a bunch of other districts around the state, with a company that actually does cardiac screenings. But my kid was called the Beast. He had 10 varsity letters before he graduated in high school, and that was after missing a year and a half of sports. You don't know what you don't know, right? This does not require the coaches to do much more than about 45 minutes of education. I posted the video from Simon's Heart that the coaches are given and required to watch, 7.45 minutes. If you're aware, you're aware. God forbid any coach has to feel like Coach Sabbath does, who's my son's baseball coach, or Coach Tyler over at Blue Valley Southwest, that watched a kid die. We are trying to stop the trauma of those 300 people in the stands from being manifested the rest of their lives. From those kids on that ball field, that senior in high school who ran from home plate before he even knew what was wrong with my son, ran to that mound because they care about each other. And those coaches who carry the scars of what they went through that day, watching a kid die, then being brought to life, and they still carry it. My advocacy for you all is the bill is very simple, and it's revenue neutral. Doesn't cost anything but a link sent to parents that says I've signed off on it, or a piece of paper. I'll supply all the paper y'all want for every high school kid in the state if it comes out of the foundation that I'm working with, if that's what's needed. It is just saying, have you coaches know enough? I will tell you the one thing it does really talk about is that fainting is a precursor. Right now, more than ever, because of the pandemic, I'm going to make a really hearty plea. Endocarditis, myocarditis, and pericarditis are inflammations. They're viruses in the heart, okay? Mayo Clinic shows 70 different types of viruses and bacteria can cause swelling of the heart. It's swelling, it's inflammation, right? And both the coronavirus vaccines that are out there right now, and you can Google it and find out, they have heightened the risks of male athletes more than anybody. And if you got COVID, anybody with COVID, it's a virus. It can create those. And the attacks and the cardiac arrests of young men especially have risen fourfold in the last 24 months. I'm going to say this real carefully. Only 1 out of every 10 persons that has a sudden cardiac arrest lives. That's very, very, very bad. If this bill, just alerting parents to get checked before they do stuff, it's just one more check. Just go one more check. Or go look at it. Or at least alert your pediatrician, hey, he fainted or she fainted. I can't tell you how many athletes' parents have said, my daughter fainted, and we went and had her checked out, and they said the cardiac screening was good and clean. Wow, they're halfway there, right? That's all we're asking for is awareness. For the coaches, they are not required to perform, but guess what? There is no law in the state, but the Kansas Board of Education does stipulate that's effective in the school year starting in 2019 that all that graduate from a Kansas high school in part of their health class are now taught at least hands-only, do not need to have facial time, hands-only CPR and basic knowledge of an AED. The question was there a law requiring AEDs in all schools? Not necessarily. I carry one with me everywhere because I don't trust that every school is going to have one because they're not cheap. $1,200 out of my own pocket. By golly, you're not going to die when I'm near you because I'm CPR and AED certified. But I've been carrying that. People laugh at me. I don't care. I'm not going to die when I'm around. But not every school has to. And for trainers, not every high school is required to have an athletic trainer. And I can promise you that the few AEDs at Olathe West High School, I think there's 4 or 5, do not go with every one of their teams to every practice and to every game, and they're not going to be all there, and the trainers are not going to be there. We're relying on the fact that the kids themselves have learned a little bit. Every supervisor, the one thing I'd like to add is maybe a supervisor word rather than just coaches. Anyone that's supervising your extracurricular. You ever seen the marching band? That's athletically competitive. It just happens to be with an instrument. Or cheerleading, or dance, or theater. Those are tough too, and those supervisors are required to have AED and CPR training. We're just reminding, think of that this is, tell us, tell me. My son did have something wrong with his heart. A week after he was in the hospital, they went and stopped his heart and they found out what it was. And it was probably something that they fixed. It was probably something that had we known, we'd have gotten fixed. There is a senior at Mill Valley High School, spectacular. She went and got her testing before and found out she had a hole in her heart. She had that hole surgically fixed, and she is a state qualifier in cross country and track now, 4 years later. If you catch it, you can fix it. And if you can fix it, they can thrive. So that's the end of my testimony per se, and my proponent. I think it's a great bill. Texas did it 2 years ago. Is it as far as everybody would love it to be? No. Would we love to be able to have millions of dollars to fund a good cardiac screening for every kid? Yes. Is it going to happen? Not anytime soon because budgets are tight. Florida does now have a state law that requires before athletics that they have at least an EKG, and almost every nonprofit foundation in that state has come together and said they would fit the bill to $10 a pop. It's only $10. This is just about a piece of paper being handed to somebody saying, are you aware of? And if you've taken that choice, that's all we're asking, is a few more people to know those choices. So I thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions. As you can kind of tell, I spent pretty much the last 3 years researching and talking to, I know the Simon's Heart folks that were creators of this legislation, that's why their name's in it, but there are many other organizations that can do the same basic education. So any questions for me that I can help?
Hey, Brian, we're going to hold questions until we finish all the testimony.
Good.
I do
Thank you.
appreciate, this is great information for the committee, and I do appreciate your passion and understand why this is so meaningful for you. So thank you. We had one more proponent, Jana Rojas, and I'm seeing a note here that she might be written only. Is Jana in the room? I don't think so. Consider her testimony written only. And then we also have neutral testimony from the Board of Education from Dino Horst and Ben Jones, and from Dr. Philip Barteman from the Kansas Athletic Trainer Society that is written only. Is there anybody else in the committee room that was wanting to testify today on House Bill 2659? Do you see anybody, Adam?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, well, let's go ahead and open it up for questions before we close the hearing. So I'll let you handle those questions, Mr. Vice Chairman. If there's
Thank you,
anybody
Mr.
that
Chair.
has any.
Representative Estes.
My first question is for Mr. Connell. You mentioned that your school system participated in a group that did heart screenings. So your son did have a heart screening before. He did not.
That's why we didn't know. That's why if we'd known, we would have.
So it was available and you didn't know it was available?
Correct.
Okay. You mentioned EKGs. Would they have been done as part of the normal heart screen that the group that you were associated with would have done had you chosen that option?
So nationwide, there are groups, there are two primary differentiating levels in what we would call a student or an athletic cardiac evaluation. One is a simple EKG that looks at the electrical signals in the heart. About 70% of major significant cardiac issues can be identified through a simple EKG. There are other things. The group that we work with is out of Kansas City. They actually do these in 16 states. It's myheartcheck.org. They do a little different. They actually do the full cardiac survey, or what most parents can remember about their kids. Let's be honest, that's not everything you can remember about their family. They do the EKG and record it. They do an echo, which is now basically sort of a sonogram of the heart from the front, the back, the side. So they've now looked at the thickening of the heart walls and find holes in the heart that if you weren't stressed at that time, you wouldn't have seen. They also then employ a full pediatric cardiologist so that every single test is reviewed. I think their rates are like $119 to $149, and I work with a foundation that pays all that cost for kids. They just did an event with Boys and Girls Club in Kansas City, where that was 100% paid for any kid that wanted to have a screening. So there are a lot of nonprofits that will absolutely fund all that if they were available. We just didn't know, Representative Estes, at the time that they'd been doing them. Right. You think your kid's healthy and you don't know when you think your kid's sick. That's why if they're fainting, and that's one in this bill, my son's had a heart race, his heart was racing one day, or my daughter fainted. So that's really what that really is. So I hope that answered the question.
Yes, thank you very much. May I ask a second question?
Absolutely.
Craig, I had emailed you some time ago asking about how different is this from what the state currently requires, and do you have any idea of what the cost differential would be for families?
Excuse me. For those who don't know, Craig Nineswander with the State Department of Education. As far as what's different from what the state currently requires, I think Jason, as well as the proponent, touched on CPR is typically what's required for the state or across the state for coaches, athletic trainers, some teachers, which is not what this bill is specifically addressing. Cost for, did you say families?
Yes, and I'm sorry, I did a poor job of framing my question. If we were to, because in my mind, I'm recalling the original Simons Foundation email that we received, and they suggested the higher level of screening. And I don't know what the typical cost for the typical physical that kids have to get to participate is. Do you have a ballpark of what that cost is from feedback or?
I don't. I can tell you it's going to vary from district to district. In some districts, they'll set up a system where the local physicians come in and do it for free, run students through physicians and nurses at certain times. Other districts, I'm sure that's not the case. So short answer to your question is I don't know any costs associated.
Thank you.
Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. So this would be a question for you, Brian, and possibly Representative Stoggs still. So I have a little bit of trouble with the word prevention in the title of the bill and was wondering if you would object to either replacing the word prevention with the word awareness or adding the word awareness to where it would become the Prevention and Awareness Act, because it seems like this is as much about awareness as anything.
I concur exactly with you. That was one of the notes that I had written down for myself, is that it is 99% about awareness. Some kids, you're never going to be able to prevent some cardiac arrest, right? So you're right. If you replace the prevention with awareness, I'll be okay with that.
Representative?
I think that's a really good suggestion. I'd have no problem with that at all.
Okay, thank you both.
Representative Donahoe.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Could I speak to, sorry, I don't know your last name, but Department of Education? I have a question. So obviously you are now aware of this situation based upon this testimony. Has the state school board, this not have had any discussion with regard to this malady, in that it the number of cases or the cause very serious death by cardiac arrest and that? Do you have any policy? Have you discussed any policy because of the seriousness of this?
I'm not aware that they've had discussions in the time that I've been there. You do have testimony from the state board with this bill. It's neutral testimony, and Dina can correct me if I'm wrong. I think the primary reason it's neutral is they feel like perhaps the Activities Association is better positioned to oversee this process than the State Board of Education is.
So my question then was, would you make any recommendation now based upon what you've heard that maybe the state board should look into this or have some recommendation based upon the seriousness of it?
I believe the state board's recommendation is that the Activities Association would be the appropriate body to do that. They have better expertise than what the state board does.
So basically that's what, I guess, can I continue? So that's basically what I'm hearing is your advice to the committee.
Yes, sir.
It's really more their purview.
I think I can safely say the board believes yes, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
We're going to go to Representative Schmidt and Representative Byers, and then I believe we have Jana Rojas is online, ready to provide her proponent testimony as well. So we're going to go with that after Representative Schmidt and Representative Byers.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Nunschwander, a couple of quick questions. First of all, it is required, is it not, that schools have AEDs in their buildings? Is that not a requirement?
I wanted to say yes, but I can't swear to that. I believe it is.
It seems like I remember when that happened. I was a superintendent and we had to put them in all our buildings, but the issue still arises. They may not be everywhere we need it. And then secondly, and I don't know if you probably don't know the answer to this question, but is this something that would be caught? All kids who participate in activities have to have a medical evaluation, right? They have to pass a physical. Is this something that would be caught in normal physical? I'm not sure if you're the one to answer that question or.
My opinion, I would say not necessarily, and I think the example we just heard would indicate that no, it would not necessarily be caught.
Yeah. And then the final question, from the State Board of Education, they mentioned about having informational meeting by coaches for all activities.
That, I believe, is not required, but it's a fairly common practice. Am I correct in that?
I think that's an accurate statement, yes. It is accurate that it's not required. I believe it's also accurate that it's relatively common, but it is not required.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Representative Byers.
Thank you. I went ahead and took the liberty of looking this up, but CASHA rules, it's Rule 10, Article 9, requires not just coaches, but also any activity sponsor or assistant sponsors and coaches, aides, and assistant coaches be certified or trained in cardiopulmonary resuscitation and how to use an AED as well. I would say that what we may be looking, if we're talking about awareness, is how can we persuade CASHA to add the awareness component to this, and maybe in the case of the physical, have that included. And I know that from my own experience with my students, I used to be a band director, but with my students and with my own kids, that physical is not necessarily administered by someone who would be have the equipment to look at the cardio side of things. It's more just a general physical. And so maybe that would be something that we can add into that. Thank you.
All right, and with that, we're going to take a break from questions for a minute and go back to WebEx, where I believe Jana Rojas is online. If you're ready, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much. Good afternoon. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all today. As you said, my name is Jana Rojas. I am a physical therapist here in Kansas, and I'm also the mother of a child who suffered sudden cardiac arrest as a result of a case of viral myocarditis. So as you were just discussing, some causes of sudden cardiac arrest would not be detected easily on a physical, and viral myocarditis is one of those. In a case of viral myocarditis, a child contracts the virus. Multiple viruses can cause this, and it creates inflammation in the myocardium, or the lining of the heart muscle. So those are the kids you'll see maybe a couple weeks after their virus. They just don't seem like they're getting over it. They're a little bit weaker, and this bill talks about giving awareness to the students and the parents and also the coaches and staff with the teams for the signs and symptoms to look for that maybe they wouldn't have had 6 months ago when they had their physical, but they had a virus and now they still have fainting, or they have excessive weakness, shortness of breath, and activity. And these are the signs and symptoms that are really highlighted in this bill, and I think it's very, very important for those reasons. The American Academy of Pediatrics estimates that about 2,000 children will die each year of sudden cardiac arrest. It's the leading cause of death in student athletes. So the more awareness we can get to parents and to student athletes and to coaches about some of these warning signs, I think the better off we'll be to help prevent these kind of issues in the future. Post-viral myocarditis, as I discussed, it has been around forever, but it's increased dramatically since COVID-19. I think we've all heard of myocarditis as a result of either COVID-19 infection or vaccination. And so I think this is an especially timely bill at this point in time, so that parents do get some awareness of these signs and symptoms. In my written testimony, I went through some of the bullet points on the bill, but I realize you've been talking about that already. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have about why I feel this is so important, or what I know about myocarditis and other causes of sudden cardiac arrest in student athletes.
Thank you so much for your testimony, and I think now we can continue along with questions if they have any more questions. Seeing none, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, committee. I appreciate it. I do feel like this was a good hearing to have, and I do feel like there's things that can be further discussed. I do not plan on working it tomorrow at this point in time, but if you have strong feelings one way or the other, let me know. With that, committee, I'm going to close the hearing on House Bill 2659 and thank everybody for their testimony. Committee, I'm going to come back into the room. I don't think I could work very well to work bills from my office, so I'll be back in just a second, and there's 2 bills that I'm planning on trying to work today, and I'll be right there in a few seconds.
Thank you all for having us.
Thank you, committee. Let's go ahead and we're going to start with Working House Bill 2466. So if you could pull out your folders on that. Last week I sent out the language that I've been working on with Jason. I hope you've had a chance to look at that. The primary amendment is dealing with Section 5 and the graduation requirements. And I'm going to have Adam start off the process with making a motion on that balloon language so we can begin to discuss that. And then I'll let Jason come up and explain it. Yeah.
Committee, I do move that we pass out House Bill 2466 favorably.
You heard a motion and a second from Representative Estes. We will now go into discussion on the bill and look at this first amendment that's being passed out. And I'm going to let Jason go ahead and walk us through the explanation of this first amendment. But I'll let you, let's go ahead and make the motion on the amendment.
I do move my amendment and request the bill be amended.
We have a motion to amend, and do we have a second? A second from Representative Estes. All right, Jason, thank you. If you could go over this balloon language.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The balloon you see in front of you does three different things. First of all, it does remove sections 1 and 2 from the bill, so there would no longer be a specific line item appropriation for the grants from the State Board of Education or the scholarship from the State Board of Regents. Those appropriations would then need to be handled by the House Appropriations Committee as provisos to line items in the budgets for the Department of Education and the State Board of Regents respectively. Along with that amendment, I'm going to direct your attention to page 4 of the balloon. You will see a new section 5 added there. This is the scholarship program for the State Board of Regents. So the State Board of Regents would still be authorized under the bill to award scholarships to pre-service teachers under this new Section 5. It contains all of the substantive provisions that were contained in Section 2, but makes it a substantive provision of law rather than a one-year appropriation proviso. So this would go into the statute book, and provided there are sufficient appropriations for the scholarships, the State Board of Regents would continue to award those scholarships year after year under that new language. The other change, as the chairman has noted, begins on the bottom of page 2 and goes to the top of page 3. This is the change in section 5, so that instead of requiring each high school to offer at least one computer science course beginning in school year 23-24, the district would offer the course or submit a plan to the State Board of Education describing how the district intends to offer such course and the school year in which it will first be offered. And then at the top of page 3, you'll see instead of a graduation requirement, which is being struck, there would be a reporting requirement each year on January 15th for the State Board of Education to submit a report to the governor and legislature on the progress of offering computer science courses in the public schools, along with the information there regarding high quality professional learning providers who have received grants, how many teachers have been prepared by such providers, number of teachers teaching courses compared to the number of teachers prepared by those providers, and the number of students reached. And that reporting provision would expire on July 1st of 2025, so there would be essentially 3 reports conducted by the State Board under that provision.
Thank you, Jason. We're going to go ahead and open it up to questions and discussion. And I will tell you that I have spoken with Troy Waymaster in regards to the proviso language, and he just told me that that was a lot better way to go as far as being successful in getting this appropriation made as opposed to a line item in the budget. And so that's why I decided to listen to my chairman of appropriations. But questions on this balloon language, Representative Byers?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is on the definition of pre-service teachers. Would that include teachers that are currently in the profession but not teaching computer science to be able to access the scholarship to gain that certification?
Go ahead. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, in my understanding, pre-service teachers would be teachers who have not received their teaching license yet, not entered into service. There may be an amendment later to add in-service teachers to that scholarship program, but as it's currently written in this balloon, it still only applies to those teachers who are still receiving their education degree.
And there is an amendment coming.
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? I've tried to address the concerns that came up in the hearing and to move this issue forward, this bill forward. I do think it's very important, and I appreciate your time in helping to look at this amendment and hopefully getting it passed so that we could continue the process of getting this bill to the floor. Further questions before we vote on the motion? Representative Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering about the reporting requirement. Have we gotten any feedback from the State Department of Education or the state board? Is that something that is an issue, or?
I don't think so. We could ask that question. I think we have somebody from the state board who might be able to address that. I pulled out the requirement for the class because I didn't feel like it should be in the bill, but I did feel like this reporting language would help continue to facilitate the process to get more classes offered in a timely manner. But does either Craig or Dina want to address that question?
I don't want to sound flippant, but I have to say, we love to do reports, sir. That's not a problem. But in this instance, we would have to reach out to a couple of other organizations to get some of the information, but I don't think it would be an overwhelming burden.
Okay, thank you. Further questions from the committee? Representative Schmidt.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I commend you for seeing this as an issue that needs to be addressed, and I think probably every educational organization would probably agree with that. The question is, where do you find them and how do you get them? But you know, working towards that end is a good goal, and I appreciate that.
And that's one of the goals of the bill, like I said, even when we had the testimony. So I do feel like this is a good step in that direction, and the money will help facilitate that. Another question from Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I would be a proponent of making it a requirement, but I understand that there is not a lot necessarily of agreement with that. But when you say this is a good start, does that mean that down the road, maybe in a year or two or three or whatever time frame, that you might look at this again to make it a graduation requirement?
I think it is a goal. It would be my desire to work with the Department of Education and the state board. There's currently a graduation requirement task force, and that would be my recommendation that we work towards that goal, and to have the flexibility even in the recommendations being made from that committee to be that recommendation be included in their remarks in their report. So that's what I intend to do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll vote in favor of this, but I just want to be on record that I would favor a requirement. Thank you.
Further questions before we vote? Representative Dono and then Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So what if an individual is awarded the scholarship, takes the course and everything, but then doesn't go into teaching for whatever reason?
I would ask Jason. I believe the bill is silent in that regards to that question.
There is no clawback provision under this scholarship.
And we had that discussion in hearing about whether that would be a good idea or not. And I do believe the discussion that we heard was that it would not be a good idea to have a clawback. Representative Stogstill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I keep hearing from a whole variety of different educational sources that finding teachers right now is a real problem, and it's going to be exacerbated come next year. And I think anything that we can do to get teachers trained in computer science and so on is a good thing. I'm just wondering if we have any idea the size of this problem. Do we know how many teachers we are lacking to teach computer science effectively in our schools all across the state? And is this enough to encourage those people to take computer science courses and so on? And how are we going, is this going to encourage our students at the universities and so on to get trained in this and certified in being able to teach computer science?
I know that we had testimony from Katie Hedrickson, and they have some idea. I know I talked to her in regards to even the appropriation, and she agreed this was a good starting point. Would I like to put in more? Yeah, I would. But I do believe that if we show success with the money that we put in, we can build on that and continue to appropriate to meet the need. And by starting this process with this bill and with $2 million, again, we're dealing with both teachers that are finishing up their degrees in our universities to encourage them into an area of education that is going to be a growing market where they should have good job security, but then to encourage teachers actively teaching now to look at expanding their capabilities with getting these types of teaching skills and certifications. And so it's a good starting process. And it would be my intent that once we start this with a proviso this year, that we would continue that process as we move forward and we evaluate how we accomplish. It's something I learned a long time ago, Plan, Do, Check, Act. And I believe with this bill, it would be very important to monitor how we're doing, evaluate, make a new plan, and act upon that in the years to come. Further questions before, okay, Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to make sure I'm clear on the funding portion. So the funding will not be required through this bill. It will come through appropriations. And we know that if we pass this, the funding will come.
There are no guarantees in life.
Okay, okay.
And again, would I love to keep a line item for the money in this bill? Yes, I would. In speaking with my chairman, even if I do that, the appropriation process still does its job, and he recommended to me that this was the path forward for this committee, and I listened to him.
Okay, so then if the ball drops between here and appropriations, then how is this going to affect, then these schools are going to have to turn in reports that say, well, we didn't recruit anybody, we didn't give any scholarships because we didn't have any money.
Even without an appropriation, this process could move forward in regards to at the Board of Regents level and with trying to get teachers trained and certified. It's facilitated by money, but even without, it could continue. I am very committed to getting that proviso language put in, and I'm confident that I have a good shot at doing that with the help of my committee to speak with leadership to recognize the importance of this bill and the need to get money out there to help facilitate. So again, even right now, there are efforts going on to get teachers trained and certified, and we heard from Professor Scott Deloche about what he's already doing, and even last year, and last summer, classes are being offered and teachers are being trained, and we just need to help facilitate more action, and this bill is a way to do that. So again, in regards to reports, we still would be able to be working with school districts. And again, I believe that there's resources out there, even in the private sector, that, and we heard from different groups that spoke to regards to this topic and this bill that want to help. And, so there is a need and there is the ability to meet that need, and this is just one part of that. this bill.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're not setting schools up for failure
No,
that in 2
and
years
again,
we're gonna
I do
hear-
believe there are other resources available. I've been told, and I'm checking into it, about possibility with the infrastructure bill that was passed by our federal government, that there might be resources there. I haven't confirmed that yet. So I'm looking into other options to help get money into getting teachers trained and certified. But I appreciate your concern.
Thank you.
Further questions before we vote? Representative Schmidt.
Mr. Chairman, just in this, the amount of money here won't go very far. We understand that. But I think to keep in mind for the future, some of this, it would be good, I think, if we directed it towards providing, since we may not find as many teachers as we want, we can do dual credit courses with the colleges or trade schools, or even as they're working with a lot of industry. We can get kids trained that way too, if we don't find enough actual teachers in the school.
And I talked with my Mays superintendent. They're already doing that. They're working with Wichita State and industry to offer some good classes. Unfortunately, a lot of parts of the state don't have those ability, and that's why this bill is help to make this more uniform across the state, and opposed to just the areas in our urban areas that are already successful in teaching, our students. Representative Estes? No? Okay. All right. I think we've had a good discussion. I'm going to go ahead and call the question, and let's open up. And if all in favor of the amendment that's been proposed on 2466, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right. We have two more amendments that are dealing with some of the questions that came up, and I will let my vice chair make the first one, and I think Jason is passing out the language as we speak. But go ahead and make the motion as they pass it out.
I have an amendment, and I will let Jason Long
explain it,
do his amazing work of explaining it.
Okay, you want to make your motion, and we'll get a second.
I make a motion to amend.
Okay, we have a motion to amend. Do we have a second? Representative Estes seconds. Jason, do you want to go ahead and explain this second balloon?
Mr. Chairman, balloon amendment number 2. This was an amendment that addresses the issue on including not-for-profit private post-secondary education institutions in the state of Kansas within the scholarship program. This amendment, as you can see, was originally applied to the appropriation proviso in section 2. With the prior amendment being adopted, that section is stricken. And so this language would be inserted on that new section 5 of the prior balloon within the scholarship program, so that is clarified that scholarship award could be to pre-service teachers who were enrolled in courses of instruction at a not-for-profit private post-secondary education institution in the state of Kansas. The language you see on this balloon is standard language we use to describe such institutions in state statute.
And we did have testimony during the hearing in regards to this motion, and I felt like it was a good motion, because I think the testimony we heard was about 20% of the teachers, currently are going through institutions like this. And so I didn't, want to leave them out, and that's the purpose of this balloon language. Questions on the balloon amendment? It's pretty straightforward. Doesn't change the bill in any way other than allowing them to participate. Without further questions, I'll let you close.
Mr. Chairman, I close.
All right, you've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, committee, one more.
Mr. Chairman, I have amendment, and I move that we amend House Bill 2466.
For the motion, second by Representative Estes. Unless somebody else wants to jump in. Representative Estes' arm is getting tired over there. No. All right, I want to let Jason walk us through this one. And again, this one's pretty straightforward also. It came from discussion in committee hearing.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is balloon number 3. Again, you'll see the amendment is to the proviso language in section 2. And so again, this amendment would be moved and worked into the language of new section 5 of the first balloon that was adopted by the committee instead. The amendment would include licensed teachers who are in service teaching already as eligible to receive the scholarship awards from the State Board of Regents under that program. So if a licensed teacher was back in college taking a computer science course, they could apply for and be eligible to receive a scholarship for that course, as well as pre-service teachers who are looking to complete their degree.
And during the hearing, this point was made, and I agree that it had merit, and that's why I'm bringing this language to amend the bill also. Further questions from the committee? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman, I close.
All right, you've heard the motion. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. We have one more thing that'll help clarify and, to do a substitute motion. It makes the bill get cleaned up, and so do you want to, I think, Jason, could you walk us through, my vice chair has given me a look like he might need some help in what I just said as far as turning this into a substitute bill so you could clean the bill up, won't have the strike language in it when we carry it to the floor.
Mr. Chairman, I believe the proper motion would be a motion to pass House Bill 2466 out favorably as substitute for House Bill 2466.
All right, and I'm sure my vice chairman can regurgitate that.
Regurgitation, yes. With that, I will regurgitate the motion made by Jason Long. I move that we pass out House Sub for House Bill, or we pass out House Bill 2466 as amended as a substitute for House Bill 2466.
All right. I think you did a very good job there, Mr. Vice Chair. Do I have a second? Representative Murphy. Discussion. Again, this cleans the bill up. The strike language makes it easier to understand when it gets carried on the floor. Seeing no discussion. Representative Sanders, do you have a question?
So then, if I'm understanding this process correctly, when this bill gets, if this bill gets carried onto the floor, then it won't be as amended?
No.
Okay, thank you.
All right, good question, no. All right. Representative Schmidt.
But it will be then written out with all of these amendments attached and
yes,
like strikeouts removed and.
The correct regurgitation will be there.
Okay, thank you for bearing with my.
No, it's good learning process for everybody. And I talked with the chair, with my revisor, and agreed that this does help sometimes to facilitate carrying the bill on the floor. Without further discussion, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. Thank you, committee. I look forward to getting this bill on the floor, and I appreciate you all now are members of the Wolf Pack. So, we have one more bill I'm going to try to work today. I think this is a really quick one. We had this above the line last week, and I'm going to let Representative Estes make the motion on Senate Bill 62. So Representative Estes?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass Senate Bill 62 favorably.
You have a motion. Do you have a second? Representative Thomas, or did somebody else jump in? Representative Smith.
And I have an amendment.
Okay.
And
the amendment is being passed out. We're going back to the base bill on the vision screening, and I'll let Jason, after these get passed out, just explain. But this is a very simple, motion to go back to the base bill.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, last session, Senate Bill 62 was amended to add provisions relating to providing albuterol kits within a statute dealing with epinephrine kits already to Senate Bill 62. And that passed out of the committee. The bill is back in the committee, and the balloon in front of you simply strikes those amendments that were made last session. And so you see all the stricken language throughout the bill is simply to remove that amendment that was added to the bill in committee last session, so that the bill is back to, as introduced, Senate Bill 62, which just relates to student vision screenings and standards therefore.
And before I let Representative Estes explain, I will tell you I worked in good faith to try to get, this amended language in, but I also made, a promise to the optometrists and the others that worked on the base bill that I didn't want it to kill their bill. There was a lot of questions even when this bill was above the line. And those questions and concerns got to the point where leadership removed this bill, from being worked on the floor and sent it back to this committee. And again, I agreed that at this point in time, the right thing to do was to go back to the base bill, and that's what this amendment does. But Representative Estes, I don't know if you have anything else that you would like to say before we open it up to discussion.
We gave it the good old college try, and there were enough people who liked one half of the bill and not the other, that both concepts are very important, but will each be better served letting them stand on their own.
And I'm going to open it up to questions from the committee now. Representative Sanders.
So, Mr. Chairman, do you anticipate an albuterol bill being brought back to committee?
Probably not at this time. It's always a topic that I believe that is worthy for discussion and could come back in the future.
But it's completely out of this bill now. Okay, thank you.
Further questions from the committee before we vote? Seeing none, Representative Estes? No, I don't. No, I don't think so. We're just going back to the base bill. So right now we're doing the amendment, and then we'll make another motion to pass the bill out. Yep. You've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, now you can make your motion to pass out the bill favorably as amended.
I move to pass the bill favorably as amended.
For the motion, do I have a second? Representative Thomas, seconds. Further discussion? Representative Schmidt.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to reiterate that vision screening is not just to see if you need glasses. This has a lot to do with kids' ability to read, and I've seen it happen, and it's almost miraculous when it happens. So I think.
Yeah, I spoke to the sponsors of the bill. I told them one way or another we were going to get this bill. Representative Estes.
I echo your words, and I will also add that vision screening has come a long way. And I like that this bill sets standards for it, because I was the kid who could pass vision screenings, because we used to line up on the wall, go one by one, and you'd hear all the right answers, and nobody realized I was legally blind until I walked in front of a car. So I'm very passionate about this bill. So thank you for your kind words.
And after I have my cataract surgery next week, I'll be seeing things a lot clearer. All right, go ahead and close on your motion.
I close my motion.
Oh, wait a minute. Would you have a question, Representative Featherston?
I just had a statement. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really support the vision screening part of this bill, and I think it do a lot of good for our kids, getting them to be better readers. And I just wanted to express that I'm really disappointed that forces outside of this committee forced us to strip the albuterol portion from it, because I felt like we did a lot of really good work to reach consensus on that, and that could literally save kids' lives. So I totally support the vision screenings, and I hope we'll have a time where outside forces don't prevent us from saving kids.
I can't tell you I agree with that and willing to work. And I do believe that even with current law, the ability is there, but that's a discussion for another day. And I do appreciate, I know you asked me, and in good faith, I did try. And so thank you for your efforts, and I'm willing to help in the future. All right, I'll let you go ahead now. And
I close my motion.
all right, you've heard the motion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. All right, committee, before we leave, we got just a few minutes. I'm going to let my vice chair. The ACT bill, there was some questions during the hearing, and I've been trying to work to address some of the parental and privacy issues. The ACT people have been willing to work on some language that might address some of those issues. But my vice chair, Representative Thomas, and also Representative Estes has been helping a little bit in regards to this. I'm going to let him give a brief explanation. My hope is still to try to work the ACT bill tomorrow. After Adam gives an update, you know, you can talk with me or Adam or Susan in regards to questions or concerns you have and let me know where you stand. But it's my intent to try to work the bill tomorrow with amended language dealing with those issues. Adam, could you go into just a brief explanation so that the committee is aware of some of the things that you've been trying to do to help facilitate a compromise?
Brief is what I do, sir. Representative Estes and I have been in many conversations with parents on one side and also the ACT. So what we're essentially trying to work on is compromising language. So the bill protects the Student Privacy Act while at the same time doing what the initial bill was set out to do, which is to give parents the option to opt out. So that's what we've been working on. We believe we've come to language that we can live with, and then we'll have that tomorrow. We should be able to get that done by tomorrow and then go from there. But any input you all have would be great. In the meantime, that's what we've spent quite a bit of time working on over the weekend. So we'll know more language-wise later today, possibly tomorrow.
Again, I just want to let the committee be aware. Hopefully, if we can get that language nailed down later this afternoon, we'll try to get it out to you tomorrow before committee so you can be looking at it. But again, the underlying bill is, I believe, is important. You know, we spend a lot of money with ACT to get our students tested and to allow them the opportunity for anybody who wants to. And I want to try to move the bill forward, and I feel like there's a good faith effort to do that. So I just wanted you to be aware that that's my plan at this time. We do have a hearing tomorrow too on a deaf and blind bill. And so we will have that hearing and then work on the ACT bill if it works out. I believe, and again, I don't make any final decisions until probably tomorrow when we have the hearing, but I do believe that right now that the hearing tomorrow will be informational. But again, I haven't made a final decision, but that's the way I'm leaning right now. And you'll get to hear the hearing tomorrow. And with that, committee, I appreciate your hard work today. And again, I want to I know they've left, but the hearing that we had today was very important. It's a topic that, again, as was spoken to, is very timely. And I hope that you can work with me and other groups to facilitate moving forward with this issue. And I hope to talk with our high school association activities people in regards to what more could be done with what they already do. And so thank you for the hearing we had there. And we'll see you tomorrow at 1:30. We are adjourned.